officially frowned upon.
So just to give people sort of a sense of, do you guys like operate kind of in secret vans with transmitters, or how does pirate radio work?
So the way you do it is, the traditional way to do it is you have kind of a 20, 30 foot scaffolding pole, or a couple of scaffolding poles held together with duct tape that you put up on the side of the tallest building you can get onto the roof of. You connect that to a transmitter, you connect that transmitter to an infrared link, which fires an infrared signal 1 mile, 2 miles away, and that's where your studio is.
Okay.
And then you just have some turntables set up in a studio somewhere. The reason you have this infrared thing between it is because the Department of Trade and Industry, or Ofcom as they're now called in the UK, have all these detector vans going around London, and they can find your antenna, they can find your radio signal, but they can't detect the infrared. So they can go up on the block where your antenna is and knock it down, and then they'll look at the direction your infrared signal's pointing in, and then they'll go to that block and look for your studio. Where you have the turntables tuned into your own signal in the studio. You don't have speakers coming out of the setup in the studio.
Right.
So when they knock the antenna down, the air goes dead, and that's your cue to leave. Because you know someone's on a tablet looking. Hey, so my name is Matt Mason. I'm the author of The Pirate's Dilemma, strategy director at Syrup, writer, consultant, speaker, etc. I grew up in London. I was a pirate radio DJ for much of my teens. There are all these tiny radio stations that people set up illegally all over London, just to play music to people in their local neighbourhood. And it was something that was always going on, and it was something that I wanted to get involved in when I was a kid. And I didn't think of it as something that was illegal or bad. I thought it was positive because I like the music. Pirate radio has been around since the 50s. It's still around today. It's changing slightly now because the internet has essentially given everybody pirate radio. You don't need to go and play on a pirate radio station if you can upload your DJ set or your music video to YouTube. So it's changing now, but the police have been trying to catch pirate DJs since the 1950s in London, and it's just been going strong for decades and decades. So the idea of the book was, I guess, that you can't really stop pirates with the law a lot of the time. The best way to try and to stop them is to give the people the thing that the pirates are doing, but give it to them legitimately and give it to them in a way that makes sense for them, and they'll reward you for it. And we're seeing that in businesses all over the place.
I think that the idea of something, that piracy happens because people want something and they're sort of pushing the boundaries further than they want it to be, than the industry necessarily wants it to be pushed, I think is very true. And I think that what we've seen happen in a lot of categories is people want stuff to happen, the technology gets ahead of what the industry or the category wants, and that's where piracy happens. But then ultimately the industry sort of catches up, and we see that happening in a lot of different areas. We've seen it in a bunch of different categories, and I think that the music industry, the publishing world, and entertainment in general is certainly sort of dealing with a lot of those ramifications still. Yeah, I mean, the travel industry is probably the most transformed category when it comes to the web. The web has really changed how travelers get their travel done. It used to be that there was a certain number of players in the industry. You had to do things a certain way. That's changed completely. I mean, in the United States now, 60% of all leisure travel is bought online. In Canada, it's 40% is bought online. You only have to go back about 10 years and people had no idea what online travel even was. So now you see other categories that are still grappling with those sorts of things, as I say, be it the music industry or the publishing industry or whatever, but there are some categories where it's already happened. The online revolution is frankly over, and now we're looking at sort of next waves of it. And so for me, as an observer watching what happens in other categories, having already lived through it with the travel business, it's like, well, I've seen the movie. I guess that's the point there.
You see pirates come up with good business models. A really good example is the music industry, for whatever reason, didn't want to consider digital distribution as a way to give people music in the 90s, even though it was something that was becoming more and more of a possibility. The late 90s, it wasn't something most record labels wanted to do. And it took Steve Jobs to come up with iTunes before there was really a good, legitimate way for people to buy music online. And because the record industry wasn't so proactive about that, that's one of the reasons I think that music piracy became such a huge thing in the last decade. And you see these examples everywhere when a business doesn't do something that people want to do, they don't distribute something the way they want it, they don't give them the thing they want in the place that they want it, more often than not a pirate comes along and does. And if there's money to be made there, you'll see pirates keep doing it, even if some are closed down, more will spring up. Because it's an example of market failure. The market isn't doing what it's supposed to do. And that can be, sometimes that's perfectly acceptable. Like, you could think of a drug dealer as a type of pirate, if you like, because selling drugs is illegal, so it happens outside of the legitimate market, and there's a reason it's illegal. It's illegal to sell drugs, and there's a reason we keep it illegal, but there's still demand there, so there's still going to be a business there whether the law likes it or not. So, and piracy kind of works in the same way, except more often than not it's not something as bad as a Class A narcotic, it's a music file.